with the chairman, Dr. Christopher Nambert, and also Professor Olga Sarantopoulos.
Good afternoon, all.
She is Professor of Internal Medicine and Cardiology at the University of Vienna.
Yes. May I express my congratulations to Dr. Papalois for this excellent initiative, and my appreciation and thanks to the organizatory committee, and especially to the General Secretary, Dr. Antonios Polidorou, for his immense efforts to make this conference a great success. In this afternoon session, we have 4 outstanding personalities who will outline the impact and influence of the Hippocratic medicine on the medicine of their countries, and also the prints what left Hippocrates in the contemporary interpretation of bioethics. May we start with Professor Vassilios Papalois, Professor of Transplantation Surgery at the Imperial College in London, UK, President of the European Society of Organ Transplantation, and President of the European Union of Medical Specialists. Please, Professor Papalois, proceed with your speech, please.
Thank you so very much, Professor Sarantopoulos, for this very kind introduction, and my grateful thanks to the President and the General Secretary of the Hippocratic Institute for their kind invitation to this very prestigious and enormously successful international congress. The topic I have been asked to tackle has to do with the imprint of Hippocrates in contemporary interpretation of bioethics, a massive and difficult topic indeed. And one of the things that I would like to start doing is to set the scene as to how we define ethics, let alone bioethics, because it's a word very commonly used in everyday life and in clinical practice. How we define them is a very complex story, and many different concepts come into play. You can see just some of them on the screen, but it's very difficult to make sure that we can constructively put them together and come with a very specific definition. My preferred approach to the definition of ethics and bioethics is the Aristotelian approach. You can see here on the left-hand side a detail from a very famous painting. This is Raphael's School of Athens, which is, at the moment at least, in the Vatican Museum in Rome. Raphael, in this absolutely amazing painting, painted every Greek philosopher in a way that their posture was an expression of their philosophical beliefs and values. And you can see Plato on the left side with a red robe pointing upwards, highlighting his belief that everything is being run by a superior being, dominating everything. Aristotle, just next to him, is pointing downwards, demonstrating his very realistic, pragmatic, down-to-earth approach. He did believe in the existence of a superior being, but he also believed that the study of science and the study of the world around us starts with a very pragmatic approach. In that context, when it came to Aristotle to give a definition of humanity, he didn't give a theological or philosophical or political definition. He gave a definition which was a sociological one. And he said that the humans are those who live in society. And human being is the being that likes to live in society with others. And whoever lives on its own right is either a god or a beast. When Aristotle defined the 3 pylons, the 3 main lines that rule basically this human interaction in society, he said that those were ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethics, feelings, emotions, and logos, reason. And from all 3, Aristotle believed that ethos, ethics, was the dominant force that runs and rules human behavior in society. Aristotle wrote some amazing books. My favorite one is a book called Definitions, where he defined basically everything under the sun. But when it came to ethics, Aristotle didn't define them, but describe them. And he said, we study ethics in order to improve our lives, and therefore its principal concern is the nature of human well-being. So this is the Aristotelian definition of ethics. Ethical, it's something that serves human well-being. Not ethical, it's something that it doesn't. A very pragmatic and very realistic definition that, although it was set almost 2,500 years ago, it was rediscovered, and it is the way we deal with modern bioethics when it comes to the values and the principles that we implement. There is a major challenge, though. Do we face ethical challenges in modern medical practice? And if so, what is the best way to deal with them? It sounds like a very awkward question because the immediate answer can be yes, of course, anytime. But I can tell you it's not always the case. I remember when we were expanding the ethics committee in the part of the world where I work, in our university, one of our neonatologists stood up and say, in my practice, we don't face ethical challenges. Basically, there is a huge number of pathways and algorithms ruling our practice, which doesn't allow any room for ethical challenges. And I will say you this, colleagues, have a look at this little creature, which Professor, is the subject of neonatological care. You can see this little creature with all the tubes in the world going in and out of his or her little body.
Dear Professor, excuse me. Can we make a share screen, please?
I'm sorry?
Share screen. Could you be as nice to share the screen? Because
yes,
they asked
it.
We cannot see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why. I was told that
we cannot see the PowerPoint. This is what the center is telling me.
Share. Can you see now?
Share screen.
I have done it. Can you see it now?
Yes, now it is. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, but I thought it was automatically on the screen.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor.
I sincerely apologize. But what I was saying is that look at this creature, this little creature on a neonatological bed, and you can see all the little tubes going in and out of his or her little body. And you can only try to imagine the very difficult decisions that are being taken by the healthcare professionals and the parents. Look at this picture and try to tell me that we don't face ethical challenges. We do. And it's my belief, colleagues, that anybody in our vocation who doesn't believe that we face ethical challenges in our practice should not be practicing altogether. This ethical appraisal of ethics and bioethics, it's a pretty complex enterprise. We set the scene that we believe in the Aristotelian approach of human well-being as the basic principle of this ethical appraisal. And we accept it also that it is an integral part of our day-to-day practice. How this is implemented in real life, in day-to-day practice, is a pretty complex enterprise. In the past, we had a pretty paternalistic approach, where basically the doctor was doctor-centric, if you wish, where the doctor was the dominant force of the thinking and the decision-making process. As the years have gone by, we see this as a complex partnership of all parties involved in healthcare provision. This is a very complex framework that includes individuals in the context of patients and others, families, the community, the healthcare professionals, administration, the political environment, the judiciary, the press, and I left ... because it can be even more complicated than that. The complex becomes even more challenging if we think that the modern world has a strongly multicultural character. And this is a blessing from heaven, but makes the whole debate much more complex and much more sophisticated. When it comes to how we approach the bioethical debate, what kind of principles we implement, I would suggest the following. First of all, the referrals for the debate should come from professionals or patients and families presenting real-life challenges and not just philosophical interpretations. The second principle is that a referral must not be seen as a sign of weakness. The discussion and the debate of ethics is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of strength. Cannot be a vehicle for clinical or professional complaint. There are other pathways for that, and must not be linked to an administrative agenda. In the third principle, the discussion and the debate must be honest, open and transparent, exploratory, non-argumentative, non-judgmental, inclusive, and of substance. And I highlight that. And to remember Aristotle, wise men speak when they have something to say. Fools speak simply because they have to say something. Principle number 4, people need to be prepared for the debate and be primed about the ethical aspects and the content and the format of the debate, and be ready to support others. The fifth principle, the discussion has never a black or white, right or wrong, strictly ethical or unethical outcome. It's an analysis and a synthesis of different views, offering a sense of direction to healthcare professionals and informing their decision-making capacity. The sixth principle, be prepared to accept criticism when you are preparing your views. And finally, this has to end up in learning, has to translate into learning. The debate should not stop in the debate, but it should translate into learning at a personal level, organizational level, cross-cutting, and society level. And there is no way mathematically to be able to see the value of an ethical debate in everyday clinical practice. There is no statistics or p-values to present. But I will give you here some of the feedback that you usually get that gives the whole story. And people say the ethical debate helped me, allowed me to stop and think in a completely different dimension that I didn't even believe it existed, and helped me enormously in my approach with my colleagues and my patients. So it is the build-up of this ethical culture which is important, and it cannot be measured in a mathematical way. Now, we have said, the scene when it comes to the definition we accept, which is the Aristotelian description, I should say. We have accepted that it's of paramount importance in modern practice, and we have seen the approach, the pragmatic approach as to how the bioethical debate is set in modern practice. Now, what was the influence of Hippocrates in all this? Because he lived almost 25 centuries ago. We live today, and what we just discussed represents our own practice. I will say the following. First of all, we have the famous Hippocratic Oath. And the Hippocratic Oath must be seen in the social context of 2,500 years ago, because it has accepted very unfair criticism by people looking it with the eyes and the circumstances of the 21st century. The fact that Hippocrates even introduced the concept of an oath was the introduction of a principle, of an ethical principle that we accept to this day. Because the oath is not a legally binding document, is not the law of the land. The oath is a promise, is a commitment to self and others to act and conduct yourself in a specific way. And this by itself is the first and the most important ethical principle that we still accept our days. That as doctors, we set standards and we keep our standards, ourselves against their standards and against others, not because it is a legal obligation, but because we choose to do so as human beings. So this was his first and most perhaps important contribution. When it comes to the oath itself, it's a very small text, and this is one of the best translations of the oath I have found in English language. And looking at it and reading it, it's absolutely astonishing to see that things that we take for granted now in the 21st century and present them as modern ideas have been presented to this text 25 centuries ago. And I have highlighted here in different colors the elements that I believe present different elements of ethical principles. You can see in red his emphasis that the doctor will always practice according to ability and judgment. Massively important, colleagues, I believe, because by introducing the issue of practicing based on your ability, it introduces the concept of knowing our abilities and at the same time knowing our limitations. And this is a massive ethical principle. and also exercising our judgment. That puts a lot of responsibility on our shoulders, professional responsibility and ethical responsibility, not to be influenced by totally unnecessary and irrelevant factors, but factors that finally serve human well-being. And by doing this, we need to exercise our judgment. You can see there highlighted in blue some other elements of the oath that I believe set a first set of ethical principles and principles of professional conduct. Do things without fear or in danger. Teach the art of medicine only to those who have taken the healer's oath. Do not harm or injustice to the receivers of your services. Keep yourself pure and your life and art also pure. Massively important, that sets from the very beginning, 25 centuries ago, these important principles of conduct ourselves, how we set ourselves within our profession and within society, and has to do with the altruism in offering our services. It has to do with the fact that medicine should not come ever to the hands of those who are not properly trained and prepared. We must never try to harm anybody, and definitely, last but not least, keep our life and our art pure and to very high standards. Massively important. Also, he introduced in the oath, and you can see it highlighted in purple, that he didn't believe that you should introduce euthanasia or abortion. And of course, we can debate this a lot in the context of the 21st century. But what the principle he was setting there that we must never forget is that the reason we joined this vocation is to help life, to serve life, and not to serve death. Now, the circumstances at some times allow for this to happen based on the 21st century principles. But what Hippocrates says here is that our predominant cause in joining the vocation of medicine is to serve life and serve human well-being. Furthermore, he said that the doctor should always, abstain, not even think of abusing the bodies of men, women, bond or free, those who will be under his care. Professional conduct at the human level. And I don't need to remind you the big debate that is taking place at the moment about the, human conduct and human behavior in that context of totally personal and intimate behavior. And he set the scene 25 centuries ago. And last but not least, you will never divulge and holding such things to be holy secrets. He introduced the concept of confidentiality, of medical confidentiality, all this time ago, something that we have rediscovered and is one of the big hot potatoes in our practice. Also, Hippocrates, into his work on the physician, he said that the doctor, the physician, should always be well-kept, honest, calm, understanding, and serious. And again, he introduced in that context, in this other work that he did on the physician, the first medical professional conduct in history. And this is absolutely amazing. And if you look at what he has put in there, in the ingredients of this professional conduct, I don't think that he missed anything at all. And I wish we can always be able to hold ourselves against his very high standards. Also, he introduced the concept of evidence-based practice. And evidence-based practice is not only a methodological and scientific matter, it's a big ethical matter. Because if the practice is not evidence-based, it means that it's influenced by all sorts of factors which are not subject to scrutiny, to proper scrutiny and proper quality control. And this is not only a scientific or clinical matter, it's a big ethical matter as well. And he said from the very beginning that he believed that illnesses have natural causes. They are not something divine or supernatural. They have natural causes. And as such, they can be studied, and then they can have diagnosis, you can have treatment and prognosis. He set the scene for evidence-based practice, not only in the context of the clinical and scientific concept, but also in the concept of their ethical robustness. And one of the best elements and the best examples of this implementation of the diseases being natural, can be studied and can be treated and can have a prognosis, is the famous story about his act during the plague of Athens after the Peloponnesian War. There is a lot of historical debate as to how much of this is true and how much is a myth, but a great deal of this, it is historical valid. And we know very well that he fought the epidemic by building a great fire which corrected the unhealthy atmosphere that caused the outbreak. And this was after observation as to who was surviving and who was not. So he introduced evidence-based practice in this massive crisis, which was methodological and also ethically sound. And how many lessons we can learn, colleagues, from that for what we are facing today. So that will teach us that decisions that we make are not influenced by a political or financial agenda, but or strictly speaking only by an evidence-based clinical and ethical agenda. It will be the best way to face the pandemic we face now and whatever the future might hold for us. So my last thoughts is that this great Greek healer and philosopher, the father of medicine as we know it, 2,500 years ago, set the ethical principles of medicine and left his imprint in history. And it's something that we practically have rediscovered in the modern world. And if we wish to practice at the highest possible level, it will be a great thing for all of us to go back and humbly study his work and his teachings. I'm most grateful for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Papalois, for this insight, for sharing with us this in-depth information of this very important and accurate issue of bioethics. I will keep in mind what you said. Ethics serves the well-being of the patient, of the human being, and all of us, we medical doctors, we have this obligation, not because of legal obligations, but because we choose to do it with all our heart and our soul. Thank you very much.